Hubble Bubble, Toil and Trouble, Kitchen Horrors and Firesider, I suppose, is what we're going to talk about today, because we're talking kitchen horrors, I think. Is that right? I don't really know what kitchen horror is. Is this kitchen witchery, something like that?
I think that's what you were going for, yeah. I think I said a phrase about being a whore in the kitchen.
Something about meatballs.
Something about meatballs?
Yeah, you know,
What?
the Sicilian meatballs. That's magic in itself.
Okay.
You know what they do to meatballs, don't you, in Sicily? Keep their husbands loyal to them.
Oh. Yeah, why did you have to go there?
Because one would say that's magic. Others would say, no, it's just gastronomy and it just adds to the flavour. But I'm pretty sure they do it for both reasons, because it adds to the flavour. What does it just give a bit more iron or minerals or something to the meal? I'm not sure. And then also, it's the magical side of things. Like a certain someone asked me what crystal to put in their husband's sock drawer to keep him loyal. I said, honey, no fucking crystal's going to keep that man loyal.
Yeah, that's the phrase. They want a lady in the kitchen and a whore in the bedroom.
Oh, a lady in the kitchen and a whore in the bedroom. So what are we talking about then? Are we talking about the lady and talking about herbal magic and remedies and kitchen witchery, or are we talking sex magic again and talking about the whore? What would you like to talk about? It's better than Lady and the Tramp.
I think we should I think we should do both. But I don't feel like we have to keep talking about menstrual blood in meatballs. It's really not what we need to be talking about, Liam.
I didn't mention menstrual blood, Chris. I merely alluded to its use.
Yes. Well, I just clarified it permanently.
Now, you Wiccans, if you're listening, get your book of correspondences out and under the meatball section, write that now. As we all know, if you're not currently menstruating, then you can just trade something for that. There was this, I heard there was a certain ceremonial magician that was going around and trying to trade things for a young lady's menstrual blood. And I'm not sure whether that's the best practice in the world, but apparently it did work. Because he was going one of these people that just picked on the Wiccans, the young and Wiccan initiates, you know, that don't really know. So, do I need this raw material, please? What do you want for it? And people were actually giving him their stuff.
Were they just handing him a moon cup?
I don't know, if I'm honest with you, but I'm presuming that they were young and gullible and therefore were actually, you know, handing over the real life thing. Right, so are we talking about the whore first, or are we talking about the lady in the kitchen?
I think we start with the lady. We can start with Lady Poison, I guess, if you want, and talk about Keithy.
Well, a Lady Poison has two kitchens.
She does.
Because Lady Poison has an alter ego. I'm not going to tell you who the alter ego is. It's kind of like a Batman Bruce Wayne thing. So Lady Poison is the Batman side, and then the Bruce Wayne side is another name, quite a mundane name, because Lady Poison has a mundane self. It might not be the most mundane self in the world, but it's as mundane as she gets. And these two people clearly need two kitchens. You know, we got your poison kitchen, which is what I like to call Lady Poison's lair, because it really is like a lair. Like, it's almost, it reminds me an awful lot actually of Eglantine from Bedknobs and Broomsticks. You know, the witch, where she gets her broomstick and that, and she's all excited, so she rushes in through the kitchen, unlocks this door, goes down another one, unlocks another door, and goes into another one. Creepy workspace in the back of the house. Yeah. That is exactly what it's like in Lady Poison's lair, you see, because there's like a kind of almost what is that? Is that a cupboard or something in the corner of the dining room? And you open it, no, it's another little corridor, and then you go beyond that. And there's many things. It's not just one room in Lady Poison's lair. It's actually multiple rooms, you know. And a lot of these witches will be very jealous, because some people love the idea of having a witch room. Imagine if you had a corridor of
witch rooms.
Come on. Yeah, that's how serious our Lady Poison is. So she'd be the lady in this. But I thought that we were supposed to be taking the piss, because Lady Poison's a proper witch, isn't she? She does like proper kitchen stuff. She don't read these green witch books where they, you know, teach you to make a little bit of incense out of some coriander that's gone off from your spice rack, herb and spice rack that you got given for Christmas like 5 years ago.
For some, when they moved in the house 20 years ago, is often really the closer to the truth, Liam. I don't think it's much Christmas in a couple of years. It's when I bought this house, I was given that spice rack, and I've never used it since. And it's normally one of those round ones that is on like a little turnstile.
Round, yeah. Okay, now you can actually make incense from a lot of these general herbs and spices and stuff that you get from your local Tesco or Walmart. If you're American, was that good American accent? It wasn't that good, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't good at all.
Walmart. That's what they call it, isn't it?
Costco,
it's like their equivalent of a Tesco or an Asda, you know. The place you go if you want all that GMO food.
Hey, Walmart is so much more than just a supermarket. It's kind of what Tesco tried to be a few years ago. You know, when you go in and they've got an opticians in there.
Oh, right. Yeah, these big.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
right.
It's more like that.
Okay, so they almost tried to turn it into a little shopping centre type thing and have all of these businesses that come along and basically rent out a little cupboard, which pays for the cost of.
No, not quite like that. As in, like they're all Walmart, but it's just a case of kind of, I suppose, more like Debenhams, where there's just.
Oh, okay, I see. Right.
So there's the kind of cooking section, and then you go down there, and they've got a sports and recreation centre, and then section, and you know you can get everything from Walmart. I think it's more that. Anyway, we're just talking about Walmart now, and we're not being paid no royalties or nothing. So come on.
Yeah, this ain't the Illuminati episode, Chris. Come on, we got to save that for the McDonald's one. It's on
Golden
the list.
Arches, I think that one's going to be called.
That's it, Golden Arches. Or maybe the Price is Ike. We could save it for the Price is Ike one as well. Some people will get the reference. Others will have to wait for when that podcast gets recorded and released. But there we go. So, kitchen witchery. There is this. I never really realised this, partly because, you know, I'm not a massive fan of books. It was actually the Lady Poison that didn't bring this to my attention, where she said, if you really want to learn anything to do with herbs, never ever read a witchcraft book. And particularly don't read one that's published by an American, because they're shite. And I have to say, most of them are published by Llewellyn and therefore are clearly shite anyway. But reading through some of these books, it's very clear that they are a little iffy. And when I say a little, I mean sometimes very much a lot iffy when it comes to the herbal side of things, because they love their magical correspondences. But what can be a little bit worrying is when they start doing herbal medicine and the medicinal use, where you're actually taking the substance into your body or making salves and things like that. Because putting a bunch of stuff on a candle can be dangerous. Going and picking stuff can be dangerous. But what often is very dangerous is when they try to create these little formulas and things and have these would-be kitchen witches go and recreate it. And I'd say that actually, I think education when it comes to herbal medicine is really quite bad. You know, I think there's a lot of resources out there, but there doesn't really seem to be a beginner friendly, this is all you need to know. And believe you me, I've looked, I've got more herbal books than any other type of book. In fact, if you took all of my herbal books, there'd be more herbal books than every other book I have. I like to collect them. It's a fascination of mine. It's a weak area for me. That's why I've got so many books on the subject, because I find it all quite fascinating.
Mine, I think, is I must say I'm the same. I've got far too many kind of herbal books, and it's because they all say different things.
Yes.
There's an overarching feeling that most of them come back from the Culpeper. So I think almost all of them use the Culpeper as a reference. But actually, ultimately, they all say different things, or have different perspectives on them, which is kind of, you know, I kind of expect that, because like we say from the intuitive method of kind of going, well, actually, these will do different things for you. Medicinally, though, you kind of expect them to be a bit more uniform, that they should, you know, release particular toxins or particular things to support ailments, the right enzymes being released, or a chemical constituents. You kind of feel like they must all have a specialism, but it's almost like they overburden it by possibilities rather than actual answers. Like, it's almost like, well, on one patient I managed to fix this, on another patient I managed to fix this, and so therefore just listed all those ailments. Does that make sense?
To me, there's a big distinction between the herbal and the herbalist books, which are the proper herbals, and the witchcraft books. With the witchcraft books, it very, very much is, to me, it is a sense of, well, I suppose, you know, I mean, I'm paraphrasing this, none of the books actually say this, but this is what my interpretation of this is. Back in the day, cunning folk, they used to do actual magic, and it was necessary. Nowadays, all we do is dress up and play. So I suppose we should put something in that mirrors the type of practice real life witches used to do back in the day. Because they can dress up their candles and put their crushed velvet on and stuff like that. But I suppose we should give them a little bit of something that is a mirror to what actual fucking magical practice is, or cunning folk arts in particular, because that's all these things, that's what they all try to emulate, isn't it? So we'll stick a salve recipe and something like that in it, and maybe we'll talk about essential oils or something, you know, and it feels like a bolt-on to a lot of these books. Where it's just a chapter on herbal medicine, and I don't like it because it doesn't really teach you. It says, okay, here's a tincture. What you do tincture, get a nice empty jar that's clean, get some herbs. This herb's good, put that in, fill it with alcohol you get from the shop, quite good proof alcohol, and then shake it every day, and I'm going to be different. And you know that I'm a really good reference. Is because I'm going to tell you to put a little bit of brown paper between the lid and the actual alcohol in that. Because if you've got a metal lid, it kind of goes, oh yes, I'm putting that in because it makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about, and there is good advice. But at the same time, you don't go no further than that. And I've heard many people say that. They've come up with some brilliant tips about putting brown paper on. I'm like, I don't know a single herbalist or person that has a basic understanding of herbal medicine that doesn't know that that's probably a good idea. Even people that make fucking jam know that, right? So this witchcrafty book, they are the last people that probably would even use a herbal first aid kit, because they just go to the doctors. They're also the last people that would be you probably want treating you if they're getting random shitty little salves out the back of a witchcraft book that are probably full of all sorts of crazy stuff. Now the herbals, where the herbals go wrong is the same way the grimoires go wrong. is that people think a grimoire, that's for someone to teach someone a system of magic. A herbal, that's supposed to teach someone how to use a herb and such. But that's not the case. It's for the initiated. Both grimoires and herbals are for the initiated. You need to have an understanding of what you do and the actual parts. The stuff that you put in a grimoire, the stuff you put in a herbal, are the things that you think, oh, I'm not going to remember that. I'm not going to remember that, so I'll record that down. That's why they read like notebooks with a page or a couple of pages for each herb and stuff like that, or illnesses and that sort of thing. You actually spend more time understanding the body, understanding the diseases, the illnesses and such, and then understanding the herbs. And the actually herbals are probably not going to help you. Because if you start picking your way through a herbal and picking random things and mixing them together because, oh, well, that's quite good for blood, it says. He literally says this on them, good for the blood. You know, it's like, oh my gosh. Some of the modern ones, like the really modern ones that have only come out in the past 2 years or so, I find them still pretty bad. They give you more of an explanation of how you might use something, but that is not teaching people that I think can really get to grips and understand what they're working with. Because I think when it comes to herbs, herbal medicine, and anything like that, you should be basically know a lot about a little than know a little about a lot. Generally, in real life, you know, it's a good idea to know a little bit about a lot of things. Maybe you specialize, that might be it. But ultimately, with herbal medicine, I think because there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong if you're actually using it for medicinal purposes. I think getting to know your herbs and getting to know your ingredients and your processes is paramount. And even if you understand, just focusing on, like the last thing I made was a muscle and joint rub, right? Even if you just understand what a muscle and joint rub is supposed to do, which is very important, what it is that it does on the body, the effects that it has on the body, what formula you're using for that, and then additional formulas, comparing and contrasting them, and then what the ingredients in each formula is for. And that, instead, what I'm seeing with a lot of herbals is cookie cutter type ones where it's just like, oh, well, this is a decent one for that. And that's why I'm so addicted to getting them, because I always want to perfect my formulas, which, of course, to a certain extent you can, but then it's all about the individual, you know.
But the thing is, do you not think that it's because we're at that level the same way when a chef buys a cookbook? They're just kind of looking at somebody else's ideas for inspiration and kind of going, oh, I see what they're trying to do there. It's more a kind of whet the appetite kind of almost voyeuristic way of working, of kind of going, oh, I wonder what they've done for that. Oh, I wouldn't put that in there. And comes from that kind of kind of seeing where somebody else has got to. And then, like you say, perfecting someone else's process. Because again, we're talking about initiated-based learning here, where you're kind of going, do you know enough to flick through a herbal book and kind of go, oh, okay, I can see what they're trying to do there. I would take that out and put this in, or get rid of half of those things and put something else in. Because that's like I find when I go in a cookbook. You flick through to, oh, okay, what have they done with their kind of classic recipes, if that makes sense? And then you kind of judge the book based on what they've done with the kind of classic recipes.
Oh, I always judge a herbal by something that you know. So if you want to buy a book on a subject, whether it's herbal or whatever it is, what I always do is I turn to the chapter or the page that has the thing on it that I know a fair amount about. So if it's a herbal, I always choose nettle and look up nettle, because I look at how much information they've got on nettle in there. And if they've got a lot of information, that's good. If they've got more information than I knew, I'm probably going to buy the book. If they've got information in there, but I think, well, that's a bit dodgy, that's a bit iffy, then I kind of use that as a, well, this is what they're saying about nettle. I'd rate that as a 5 out of 10. You know, is it worth me buying it? No, probably not for the other things. But
I'm sure
I think
you can guess what mine would be.
The teaching aspect is where I find it's a little bit iffy. So there's the Handmade Apothecary, which I've got on Kindle, and the Herbal Remedy Handbook, which I've also got on Kindle. And I bought these because I was trying to research more and more herbal medicine stuff. And I like the formulation stuff. I don't really care about healing people and getting better. I'm more like the Doctor House. It's a puzzle for me. I don't really care if I'm not doing that out of the goodness of my own heart, basically. But with a lot of things like that, I want to think, well, I really want to understand this process. I really want to understand how the hell does a tincture work? How much alcohol do I need to do? Because the first ones, they just say, I'll just get some, bottom shelf vodka. Other ones, it's like, well, there's a certain amount, you've got to extract chemical constituents and things out. Some of it can be extracted in water, some of it can be extracted in oil, some of it can be extracted in alcohol, and then you can mix things together and all that, and it just gets more and more and more and more complicated. But what I always think when I judge something like this is, how practical is it in terms of actually learning it and utilizing it? Because most of the herbals I find are not very useful in the modern age. Even these modern herbals, modern herbal dispensary, all of that sort of thing, even the one about first aid and stuff like that I've got, they've normally got like chapters on first aid, and I kind of think, would the average person that's buying this book be able to make any of this? Would they know any of this? And when it comes to the witchy books, is it good enough what they're putting in these witchy books, the advice and all of that sort of stuff? Is it in any way, shape, or form practical? I mean, would it be the sort of thing that you would find the old wise woman using or bestowing that knowledge on the next generation or something like that? And a lot of the time I find that it's not really. I find that it's just, again, rehashed correspondences.
Yeah, I think they depend on, because I think that's also why there's so many. You have the kind of herbals that are designed for the, I suppose, gardeners, the kind of green, to use TikTok or Instagram words, to the green witches, the ones that want to sit in the garden growing herbs, and not really doing anything with them. That you've got those kind of ones which are really about identification and kind of how to grow at home kind of approach. You've got those that always approach it from a kind of, I want to say, crafty kind of point of view, which is the kind of, which ones look pretty when they're dried, and which ones can I use to make, poses, and are you just you're not taking the herb in, that they're being used externally, kind of aromatically. And then you kind of have the group that are a kind of the imbibers, so the herbalists and the culinary, that are both looking for in what way can I take this in. And I feel like depending on who the writer is, you will get one of those distinct flavors of, is this a book that's designed for people, taking it internally? Is it for people that kind of want to use it, but they want to use it from an aromatic point of view?
Yeah.
And then the group that obviously want to just grow it and be around it. And my favourite ones tend to be the gardener ones. I feel like I learn more out of those than I do out of the others. But those ones don't tend to tell you the formulas of anything. Like, they don't tend to include recipes in any way, shape, or form. But they will give me really great ideas of, hadn't thought about using it that way. I wonder what would happen if I did this with it. So I think from a witchy perspective, of not wanting to take it necessarily into your body, but wanting to use it from a correspondence point of view, I think the gardener's book is probably the best one for you if you're never actually going to work with a tincture or a, and you don't actually need a formula. Then the best ones you're going to find are the gardener's ones. So whatever the Royal Horticultural Society is saying about them is going to probably give you a better understanding of how to use them in your practice. Whereas I think we tend to go for the kind of apothecary-based ones, the ones that kind of go, this is good for treating these symptoms and here's why. What I find is you get one of two options. It either doesn't give you a formula, but will tell you its constituents. So it will kind of go, this is high in this. And you're kind of like, okay, but where's your conversion chart for me to actually understand what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And I think part of it is down to the fact that actually it's almost impossible, because depending on the situation of where you're growing it will depend, climate, water, all those factor in to what the percentage would be. And I think they avoid it from a legal point of view. I don't think it's got anything to do with knowledge. And it's more to do with that, well, actually, if you wanted this information, you'll go and look in a medical journal, which is where we end up having to go, isn't it? Fishing through medical journals for specific articles about a particular chemical that you're trying to get out of one, because otherwise they won't publish it, because there's too many variables to actually, not to defend them, Liam, but I think that's what it comes down to. And obviously, if you're reading an old grimoire, the chemical constituents of rosemary in the 90, now compared to the 1700s or the 1200s is going to be a completely different plant.
Yeah. Well, you can, I mean, that's one of the great mysteries. Herbal medicine, witches remedies and such are great, fascinating mysteries, because you don't know, A, whether they work, B, whether you're getting that information from that book, like that one I got, I took it to the book club. It was published by Troy Books, and that was like some old index cards that have been published from a bunch of witches' formulas and stuff like that. Some of them are great, some of them not great. Some of them, there's better remedies that are available, but then some of them are kind of like, oh, this is proper knowledge that's been passed down, and you really have to look at what's going on. So one of the latest things that I've got is a couple of people that have asked me to basically to steal other people's formulas and tell them how to make it themselves cheaper. So I've got some anti-aging stuff, and I've also got some arthritis creams and things like that that are ridiculously overpriced. I will talk a little bit about these things in the Patreon, because we've only literally got a minute left. So what I think that would be really good is obviously get yourselves on the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon if you haven't already, because we'll talk a little bit further about this information. And I'll talk about going and stealing things from organizations. Corporate espionage, Chris. I've been up to some corporate espionage, which I would imagine you've known from the email, but don't reveal publicly. We'll have to wait on the Patreon for that. But yeah, I mean, one of the places that I go, you talked about obviously medical textbook. I think we've both got the same textbooks of what was it? The drugs as well, because the drugs that people get prescribed by the doctors, that's just fucking crazy ass stuff that can interfere with things all the time. So it's important to have that. One of the ones that I don't hear referenced, which I find actually quite useful, is the European Medicines Agency. So you can type in herbs and plants and things like that, and it'll come up with all of the different officially published articles on that, what they have investigated, and will say, yes, there's research behind this, no, there's no research behind that, or we're currently investigating this, which is very much because they keep it up to date. But it comes with herbal, human, and veterinary as well, which is always quite interesting. But there we go. That's it for the regular edition of the podcast. We'll dive in head first after the break. Is there a break? It's not really a break. All right. Bye.